Welcome, everyone, to ODVN's 13th annual press conference. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today. And thank you for powering through the traffic and the rain. I hear it was really ugly outside. So I'd like to remind everyone to turn off the ringers on your phone, forgiveness if they're set to Hang On Sloopy or Carmen, Ohio, and we hear those. So you'll notice that we have a backdrop for pictures, so please take advantage of that. And we encourage you to post the photos on your social media sites. So I was here yesterday when we were setting up the backdrop and other things, and I learned a new word, not one of those ones that you'd be using as you were fighting the traffic this morning. It was a different one. So I was here with the committee and I noticed, a lot of the familiar faces of the people on the committee. And then I noticed a new face, Casey Holderbaum. I went up to her and I said, "Oh, Casey, how good to see you. I'm so glad that you volunteered for this committee." Denise Contras was standing by her and she said, "Oh, she's doing such a wonderful job." And I said, "Oh, that's so great." Casey smiles. She says she really is enjoying the work, but then she corrects me. She says, "Well, technically, I didn't volunteer. I'm a voluntold." That's the new word. So Casey and all you other voluntolds, you are the backbone of organizations. I'd like to recognize a few people here today. Our board members, our new chair, Joanna Glover, Amber Scott, Helena Jusue, Susan Odenweller, Chelsea Scott, Julie Sunquist, and Wendy Waters Cannell. I want to thank the Ohio legislators who are here today as well. Our award winners, Senator Theresa Gaverone, Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson, who is stuck in traffic but is making every effort to get here on time, and our former award winner, Senator Nickie Antonio. We also have in our midst our survivor, Kar'mell Triplett, who will share her very powerful, profound story. I also like to recognize the Croucher family, Bob and Terry Evick, Tim Croucher, here to honor the legacy of their parents, Jim and Elsa. After the murder of their 18-year-old daughter, Tina, by an abusive ex-boyfriend, Jim and Elsa went on a mission to educate our youth about dating violence and domestic violence. Their presentation in high schools reached tens of thousands of students. My daughter, Julie, was one of those students. After hearing Jim and Elsa speak in her class, she came home and told me it was the first time she didn't feel alone. That what was happening to others, what was happening to her. It was profound, and that changed her life. It changed our lives forever. And we are forever grateful to your parents, Jim and Elsa Croucher. It is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces here today. What an extraordinary community we have, all of you standing in solidarity with domestic violence victims, each of you an essential part of our movement, stepping up to make a difference, and we are so very grateful. Legislators who are keeping our line item in the budget and create laws to keep our homes and communities safe. Funders who keep our programs on the state and local level operating so the amazing people who are on the front lines on a daily basis can continue their vital work, assisting victims, providing housing, legal aid, education, training, and continuing to make advances in how to heal from the long-term effects of the devastating trauma from domestic violence that affects minds and bodies. We're grateful for the agencies and organizations walking in step with us, our safety officials, legal professionals, advocates, healthcare providers, all prepared to step in and help victims and survivors. We thank the media for putting a spotlight on the issue. We thank our victims who take that first step toward safety and become our survivors who courageously step forward to tell their stories. Friends and family members who are beside a victim every step of the way. No matter how long the journey, no matter how many phone calls. Fortunately for me, I had my two sisters in different time zones. So I had almost around the clock coverage, and I used it a lot and still do. Thank you again, everyone, for stepping up and stepping in. You are so needed. You are so appreciated. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our newly elected board chair, Joanna Glover.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Let me put on my second set of eyes. Thank you for joining us here today. It is truly powerful to see so many advocates, partners, and community members who stand in support of survivors of domestic violence. A heartfelt thank you to our legislators and public officials who continue to champion this work. Your leadership and advocacy make a real difference, and we need you now more than ever to help us continue what we do best, protecting and empowering survivors and their families. This year has been tremendous progress and hope. YWCA of Greater Cincinnati proudly opened Francie Pepper's House of Healing, an up to 120-bed facility, pet-friendly domestic violence shelter designed to meet the growing needs of survivors in Hamilton County. This new space represents more than just rooms and walls. It represents safety, dignity, and healing. This year, in response to your advocacy, our elected officials reaffirmed their commitment to survivors across Ohio. The two-year state budget includes $20 million in funding for our 76 member agencies statewide. We are deeply grateful to Attorney General Dave Yost. Yes, let's give that a clap. We're very excited about that. We are deeply grateful to Attorney General Dave Yost, Governor Mike DeWine, and members of the General Assembly for ensuring that Ohio continues to provide meaningful, stable, and flexible services to our program members. And that support made a powerful impact. Together, our programs answered more than 123,000 calls, texts, and chats from our survivors. That's an average of 337 calls, texts, and chats each day. We served over 127,000 survivors with emergency shelter, legal advocacy, housing, transportation, and other vital services, a significant increase over 2023. Nearly 11,000 survivors were served in our shelters in the state of Ohio, where half of those were children. But even with all this progress, the need continues to grow. Last year, nearly 6,400 survivors, more than a third that were seeking shelter, were turned away due to lack of space. Behind each of those numbers is a person, a parent, a child, and a family, hoping for a place to heal. With the support of the American Rescue Plan, we were able to expand shelter services to hotel services, and we also offer critical financial and legal assistance. The added resources not only increase capacity, but also strengthen how our programs work together. Every week through our statewide network, one program reaches out for help and others respond. Whether it's finding a safe place for a survivor to relocate, or navigating an unexpected crisis, our community shows up for one another with compassion, collaboration, and courage. We are also expanding our services for human trafficking survivors with the support of Office of Criminal Justice Services. Our programs provided care and advocacy for nearly 500 human trafficking survivors and their children last year. And we know that there are many more who still need our help. To all of you who lead and serve in domestic violence programs, thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Your dedication is the heart of this movement. And to those who may not work directly in our programs, your presence here today matters deeply. Together, we are building a community where every person can live a life free of violence. Let us continue to listen, to advocate, and to act, because every survivor deserves safety, dignity, and hope. Thank you. Next, I am honored to introduce Lisa DeJeter, ODVN Senior Policy and Prevention, who will share the results of the 10th Annual Fatality Report. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be here with all of you to review ODVN's 10th Annual Fatality Report. In a few moments, Maria will join us and explain how we collect and analyze all of this data. But I want to start by saying that we were stunned to find a total of 157 people deceased in 108 incidents of lethal intimate partner violence this year, the highest total in the decade that ODVN has been collecting this information. It's more than 24 decedents beyond the previous record high. So this year, like every year, we grappled with how to put a face on all of the data points that you now have in your hands. And the result was this PowerPoint that you see to my left that has a few details about every life lost. In spite of the increase in these fatal cases, there are some bright spots in the information. This year in Ohio, fewer law enforcement officers were shot. Fewer children were murdered by parents, step-parents, or a parent's partner. Fewer teens were killed by other teens whom they'd been dating. And fewer pregnant women were killed by their baby's father. But none of those numbers reached 0, which would be the only acceptable number. And some of these data points trended the other direction. More Ohio children were present at these crime scenes this year. More children and grandchildren were left behind to mourn parents and grandparents. And although there were only 2 law enforcement officers shot this year, one of those shootings was fatal. So we would like to take a moment and acknowledge the loss experienced by the Morrow County Sheriff's Department and observe a moment of silence in honor of Deputy Daniel Scherer, who gave his life protecting his community. And while we do look for trends in the data, sometimes what we find instead are questions. For the past few years, we've been able to compile more and better demographic information about the folks who've lost their lives in these cases. And we know there's always a disproportionate impact on communities of color. But this year, 56% of the primary victims who died were people of color. And that leaves us questioning how communities that are often over-policed can still be underprotected. Another trend we spotted, we do believe can be addressed, and that's the prevalence of gun violence. Guns are always overrepresented as a manner of death in our reporting. But this year, 84% of all the fatalities together were a result of gun violence. And part of the reason this number is so high this year is because we had 40 completed murder-suicides and 4 attempted murder-suicides. 43 of those 44 cases involved guns. We also saw 8 survivors meet the lethal force that was directed at them with lethal force. And in 7 of those 8 instances, survivors used guns to save their own lives. We saw 1 family member use a gun to protect his cousin, saving her life. And 6 law enforcement officers were called upon to use lethal force to stop offenders. In all those cases, guns saved lives. However, we continue to see victims avail themselves of the legal system and still not receive the protections they need to keep themselves safe. In more than 2/3 of these cases, victims had sought assistance with either the criminal or civil justice system. 55% of these killers had prior contact with the criminal justice system. Custody disputes were occurring in 38% of the cases with minor children, and 36% of these killers had been subjects of protection orders. So we're passionate about making sure the lives lost are remembered. But as you can imagine, working with all of this information can get quite depressing. So occasionally, when we're deep in the research, we stop and we try to imagine what it would be like if all of those folks who had criminal records or orders of protection against them had been disarmed. And this year, that may have saved more than 100 of the 157 lives lost. And this just isn't wishful thinking or fantasizing on our part. Last June in the Rahimi case, the United States Supreme Court upheld a federal law that allows misdemeanants and subjects of protection orders to be disarmed. Unfortunately, Ohio has no parallel law. So it's a tantalizing possibility to imagine that if Ohio had disarmed all these offenders as the federal law would permit, we might have set the opposite record for the fewest number of lives lost. But beyond any trend that we find in this information, there is one point that all of this data makes absolutely clear, and that is that this issue is not going away, but neither will we. It's sobering to reflect upon the information that's been compiled this year and over the past 10 years, and I know it's not easy to listen to. So I want to thank you all for joining us today to honor all of these losses suffered across Ohio's communities and in our families. We are going to turn now to Maria York, our policy director, who will give us an overview of what is, and what more can be done to reduce these numbers moving forward.
Thank you, Lisa, for grounding us in the reality of what Ohio families are facing. The data you just shared is painful to hear. These numbers are not abstract. They represent people who should still be here and children who should have been safe in their own homes. We carry their memories with us today. And of course, one of the questions people ask when they see this year's numbers is why? Why did we go from 114 fatalities last year to 157 this year, the highest we've ever recorded in a decade of doing this report? The answer is complicated. We are seeing more violence. There were more murder-suicides this year, 40 of them, and those alone counted for 80 lives lost. Gun violence also remains overwhelming, responsible for more than 80% of the deaths we tracked. In past years, more victims survived attempts on their lives. Sadly, this year, more of those attacks proved lethal. But part of the increase also reflects how we're gathering information. Our process is not scientific, but it is rigorous. We rely on news coverage, and I want to acknowledge the shift that I've personally seen over the past few years. More journalists are naming these tragedies for what they are, domestic violence homicides, and digging deeper into the facts. That raises awareness and gives us a fuller, more accurate picture. We have also built more capacity. Our policy team and interns, Hawa So and Lucy Vo, spent countless hours reviewing cases, requesting police reports, and cross-checking records. We partner with the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and I want to recognize Caroline, who is with us today. Caroline spent many hours with us gathering data and ensuring cases were verified. I also want to thank Kate Folk from the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services, who cannot be here with us in person today. Kate did deep dives into public information, helped gather obituaries, and spent hours with us silently honoring these victims. And I want to pause here to recognize someone who laid the groundwork for all of this. For the first 6 years of this project, Joe Simonson single-handedly compiled the fatality data. Because of her work, ODVN has built a decade of consistent reporting. She created the foundation for the awareness we are lifting today. This year's report tells us what we already know in our hearts. Far too many Ohio families are experiencing this tragedy, and we have to do better. And there are places where we see proactive steps being taken. In Cuyahoga County, the high-risk domestic violence court is working to reduce violence and homicide in the most dangerous cases. In Columbus, city leaders are using a data-driven approach to identify gaps in services and inform interventions, turning information into action. And across Ohio, others are working towards strengthening their responses towards the same goal: more safety, more awareness, and more lives protected. Even in the face of devastating loss, there is momentum for change. At ODVN, we've taken a hard look at ourselves and created a Survivor Voices Council so that lived experience shapes our system's advocacy. Today, one of those survivors will receive our Croucher Award, and I cannot think of a better way to show that survivors are not only at the hearts of this work, they are guiding us forward. We are also seeing movements at the State House. Ohio is launching a Safer Communities work group, the first of its kind. It is bipartisan and bicameral, bringing together leaders from both parties in both chambers, along with ODVN and our partners in victim services. This conversation begins this month, and the timing could not be more urgent as we recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We thank Representative Rachel Baker, a Democrat, and Senator Lewis Blessing, a Republican, for organizing and leading this bipartisan, bicameral effort. So while today we sit with grief, we also lean into hope. We are grateful to our many partners who are here with us today, from the courts, child support, CASA, legislators, law enforcement, nurses, and so many other systems, professionals, and survivors. Your presence matters, and we appreciate your commitment to being part of the solutions we need. Today's fatality report reminds us that no one can do this work alone, and it will take all of us working together to create safety and change. And now it is my privilege to turn us toward honoring individuals whose courage and commitment light the way forward. We will have a slight agenda change, and then I now invite Senator Minority Leader Nickie Antonio up to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'll take a deep breath and let it out.
sobering information, but at the same time, leaning into hope. I love, love, love that sentiment. I think it describes our lives on a daily basis right now. But that's okay. Because at the end of it all, we have to be able to look forward and be able to see that light and see that hope. It is my esteemed honor to be able to talk a little bit about an honoree, an advocate, a survivor, Kar'mell Triplett, a dedicated advocate for survivors herself. Since 2022, she's used her personal journey to raise awareness after experiencing stalking by an ex-partner. As an active member of ODVN Survivor Voices Council, Kar'mell, who lives in Cleveland, provides leadership and lived experience to inform policies and practices. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how she did that. Because when there was no legal recourse at the time in the state of Ohio, Kar'mell teamed up with the local news station and brought the issue to the legislature. People often ask me, how does legislation come to you? Where do you get these ideas for a bill? And we always say it comes from a number of different areas, right? Some constituent calls, a legislator reads something about an issue, an advocacy group brings something forward. And on rare occasions, it's happened to me a couple of times, a news person, someone from the media calls and says, are you aware of this issue? And in this case, Lena Lai called me and said, we just covered a story that is incredibly important and you should know about it. And further, what are you gonna do about it? What are you gonna do about it? I love when we're asked that question. And it is an honor and privilege to be in a position where we can do something about it. And in this case, Kar'mell was the inspiration and the catalyst for Senate Bill 100, which we passed in the GA last year. Her advocacy was instrumental. The bill was introduced with myself and Senator Nathan Manning. It makes it illegal to place an electronic tracking device on someone's property without their permission. And as I said, Lena Lai from Channel 3 News in Cleveland did her investigation, brought the information forward that people were using, and Kar'mell will talk about her specific situation, but we found out that, you know, little tiny air tags, those little tiny things you put in your luggage or you put in your child's lunchbox or wherever you put in your computer case, were being used, those devices and others like them, without people's consent and permission to track their whereabouts. I was proud when we passed the legislation. Kar'mell came and testified. She was an incredible advocate. It takes a lot of courage. Come here. It takes a whole lot of courage to stand and be the face of change, to be the face of advocacy, to say, this happened to me, I survived, I do not want it to happen to anyone else in the future. Amazing courage on the part of Kar'mell Triplett. Now I want you to know, she's gonna talk to you in a minute. You don't want to make her cry too early. Prior to the bill, I was proud that Kar'mell and Lena Lai were able to join us for the bill signing with the governor, which was just amazing. But prior to the bill being signed, Ohio law relied on stalking and menacing statutes. They addressed unwanted tracking, but there had to be a pattern of conduct. And what we believed, and fortunately, when we passed Senate Bill 100, one incident is a criminal offense. That's what we needed. We need to stop it right at the beginning. This bill and the work and the advocacy and the courage of Kar'mell Triplett is an example of how good public policy can be created when we listen to survivor stories, put partisanship aside, and advocate for a more safe justice system. I am proud to have worked on this legislation with Kar'mell and ODVN and all of the advocacy groups that came together to testify, to educate and inform. I'm proud to be here today to recognize her for all of her amazing work and advocating for survivors. Thank you. And I have a commendation for Kar'mell I'm going to give her before we do all of the other stuff. We're going to stand here. Okay, we're going to stand right here. All right. One more. Because we wanted to acknowledge her exemplary community service. And so we are presenting her with a commendation from the state of Ohio and the Ohio Senate on our appreciation for all of her work and advocacy. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. Good morning. My name is Mary O'Doherty. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Domestic Violence Network. In January 2022, a reporter from a Cleveland television station reached out to Kar'mell Triplett. A few months earlier, an Akron police officer had found an AirTag under the rear bumper of her car. The reporter wanted to interview Kar'mell about her experience as a victim of tech-facilitated stalking. The AirTag was a reminder of a painful and scary incident in Kar'mell's life, so it would have been completely understandable if Kar'mell had declined, but she didn't. She agreed to the interview, and by doing so, she can now take some of the credit for this new Ohio law that Senator Antonio told you all about. Now I'm going to give the microphone over to Kar'mell so she can tell you the rest of the story.
Good morning. This is such an honor to receive the Croucher Award. Thank you. I couldn't have imagined that this would be the result of a 3-year journey that began all the way in October of 2021. My abuser used technology to harass and intimidate me. It was the main component of the psychological warfare I endured. When I finally figured out what was going on, I left. But that was the beginning of the scariest part of my story. I work as a nurse's aide in Northeast Ohio and had to come up with the money to get my own apartment. To make this happen, I worked as many extra shifts as I could manage and even slept in my car at an Akron rest area using the restroom to bathe. No one in my family knew that for 1 week, I was homeless. After 7 days, I finally had enough money to get my own place. I went back to the apartment that I shared with my abuser to get my belongings. He tried to stop me from leaving. He grabbed me by my arms and even tried to strangle me, but I got away. I ran outside the apartment and called the police while he threw my boxes, broke my dishes, making a mess. So much so that the neighbors called the police as well. The police sent him on his way and helped me clean up some of my damage. About a half hour later, as I was driving to my new apartment in Canton, he called me back to back from unknown numbers. I didn't answer the phone until I saw a state trooper. I pulled over and I tried to have him listen on the conversation. He threatened me. He told me he would find where I live, burn my house down, and kill me. It was chilling. There wasn't even an ounce of fear in him, even after the police had just been called. I was terrified, and this had resulted in yet another police report. The next day, around 11 p.m., I got a notification on my phone, and it said an AirTag was monitoring my movements. One of the messages said, the location of this AirTag can be seen by the owner. I was freaked out. I left the facility immediately and drove to the Akron police station. I did not get out of my car until I saw an officer. I asked for help finding the AirTag. The officers helped search my car, and we finally found the AirTag. It was underneath my rear bumper. To my amazement, the officers told me there was nothing more they could do. What happened to me was not illegal in Ohio. At that time, Ohio law did not prohibit anyone from putting a tracking device on someone's car or in their belongings without their knowledge. The officers made a report. It recommended I get a restraining order. They also told me about Hope and Healing, which is a domestic violence program in Akron, Ohio. I thought going to Hope and Healing was my best chance at survival. He was trying to kill me. In the previous 24 hours alone, I had interactions with 3 different police officers, and I still felt hopeless. Going to Hope and Healing was the only way that I would feel safe. I couldn't seem to escape him. With technology and the laws both being on his side, I was now fending for myself. It was so hard. I literally cried every single night. I felt like I didn't have anyone to turn to. All I could do was work, pray, cry, and repeat. One of the most important things I did during this time period was change my phone number and my passwords for all of my emails and accounts and my location settings for apps and just about everything on my phone. Those steps worked because they stopped him from contacting me. Although I did all these things, I was living in fear. But then something empowering happened. Something that changed the trajectory of my story and my life. A few months later, in January, a news reporter emailed me and she asked if we could talk about what happened. Lena Lai with WKYC News 3 in Cleveland. She saw the police report during research. She was doing research on the increase of AirTag stalking, and she too could not believe what happened to me was not illegal. She used her platform to spread the word about my story. A bill that would make unwanted tracking a misdemeanor in the first degree was filed. A minority leader, Senator Nickie Antonio, and Senator Manning asked me if I would be willing to testify in support. I did. And Lena Lai, she kept the issue alive with follow-up reports. And on December 13th of 2024, 3 years after I was air tagged, Governor DeWine, he signed the bill into law. I met the governor, and also it was a very special day. I mean, I was there, I got to shake hands with the legislators, I got to meet the governor, I even got the signing pen. But most importantly, I got to be a part of something that I knew would make a difference. It would be a new law that would save lives. Thank you again.
Kar'mell, on behalf of the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, it gives me great pleasure to present you with the Croucher Family Award for Outstanding Leadership. I want you to leave that down there. Leave that down there. So you can, no. Yeah. I spent my first half of my career as a journalist, so this day has been very nice for me. So, all right. Making Ohio a better place for survivors of domestic violence has been front and center in the political career of Senator Theresa Gaverone. Last year, she was a co-sponsor of Senate Bill 237, which became Ohio's new anti-SLAPP law, which protects victims from often meritless defamation lawsuits. She's also co-sponsor of Senate Bill 174, which aims to improve the way Ohio courts handle child custody matters when a parent is a victim of abuse. The goal of that proposed legislation sounds good, but the bill is more than 400 pages long and faces organized opposition. Getting the bill through the legislative process will be challenging, and we are so grateful to Senator Gaverone and our other award winner, Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson, for being willing to take the lead on one of ODVN's top legislative priorities. A little closer to home, Senator Gaverone has been tremendously supportive of Cocoon, our member program in Bowling Green. 10 years ago, Senator Gaverone was the first elected official to sign on to support converting a former Elks Lodge into what is now one of Ohio's best facilities for domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. since then. According to Cancun's Executive Director, Kathy Mull, the program has benefited from multiple rounds of funding. All of it thanks to Senator Gaverone's leadership. A few years ago, when Kathy asked Senator Gaverone to help increase state operating funding for our programs, our DV line item, she said Senator Gaverone was an easy sell. Kathy told me, the thing that drives Senator Gaverone is ensuring Ohio cares for its vulnerable citizens. It's a priority for her. She's always trying to find ways to support survivors, to reduce barriers for them, to make sure we are a community with a safety net. Thank you, Senator Gaverone, for continuing to keep the safety and the needs of domestic violence survivors front and center. On behalf of ODVN, please accept our 2025 Leadership and Policy Award.
Thank you so much. This is truly an honor. I've been an attorney since 1994, and during that time, I represented a lot of families. I represented fathers, I represented mothers, and I represented children as a guardian ad litem. And I heard some really horrific stories during that time. And then when my kids were in school, my middle child, my daughter, was in 3rd grade. And I get a call that the school's in lockdown. And a friend of hers who they'd been friends since preschool, since they were about 3 years old, her father shot and killed her mother while all 3 of the daughters were there at home too. The school was in lockdown because he fled and they didn't have him right away. But that brings everything into clearer focus. Shortly after that, the Cocoon Shelter opened in Bowling Green. And one of the things you learn as you're hearing all these stories is it's really hard for victims to leave. Sometimes they feel like they can't. They have no place to go. They have no money, no income, and they have children. And so they stay in these abusive relationships. You know, as I learned more about that case, I learned that there was a long history of violence with that father and that mother. So you realize how a network of support can really help victims get away and save lives. So I'm always more than happy to do whatever I can to support the Cocoon Shelter and other domestic violence shelters in Ohio. They can make the difference between life and death. So when I joined the legislature, and I had an opportunity to work on some of this legislation, I was thrilled to do so. You know, we supported legislation to make strangulation its own offense. How important is that? And hearing the testimony in those cases and realizing why that's so important. And now, of course, I'm understanding there's an uptick in strangulation cases in Ohio, just horrific. And to work on anti-SLAPP legislation, the frivolous lawsuits intended to silence victims, you know, making it worse. I mean, just allowing the perpetrator to put their thumb on that victim. We need to get rid of that. And now legislation that modernizes domestic relations law and really puts the focus on children. We're going to get that done. It's a challenge, but I'm up to the challenge. We're going to get that done. And I'm really happy to work with my colleague, Senator Hicks-Hudson, on that legislation. So A couple months ago, I get a call from that same daughter. And she said, Mom, a friend of mine from school, who she'd gone to school with forever, her boyfriend just strangled her. Physically, she's going to be okay. And she's got the support of the community around her. So I want to thank you for the honor of this award. I can't begin to tell you how proud I am to receive this. But more importantly, I want to thank you all for the work you're doing to help victims overcome this abuse and live healthy lives. Thank you. All right. Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson has served in so many roles in local and state government. She's been a city council member, a mayor, a state representative, and now a state senator. She's also been a prosecutor, a public defender, and an assistant attorney general. Her understanding of domestic violence is so comprehensive. In other words, when a survivor and her children are involved in the criminal justice system or the child welfare system, Senator Hicks-Hudson understands instinctively how those systems might hurt or might help the family and what's at stake for everyone. Senator Hicks-Hudson works closely with Deidre Lashley, who runs Bethany House, one of our member programs in Toledo. Deidre says that the senator visits Bethany House at least once a year, has an open door policy with community members, and welcomes service providers' insights. Deidre said, she's well respected in Toledo, and she brings her voice to the table when we need her. She has a problem-solving approach, and she uses her influence and authority to really improve people's lives. Senator Hicks-Hudson also has a private law practice where she serves abused and neglected children as a guardian ad litem. She's a practitioner, a legislator, and a leader who works in all those roles to secure safety and justice for the most vulnerable. Thank you, Senator Hicks-Hudson, for helping make Ohio a better place for domestic violence survivors. I'm so glad you made it. I'm just so glad you made it. Yes, thank you. Okay, there we go. Thank you. On behalf of the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, please accept our Leadership and Policy Award.
Wow.
Oh, will you let him do that?
I can just say, wow, I am truly humbled to stand before you and to accept this award. And I accept this award on behalf of you, the practitioners, the ones, the advocates that are in the trenches each and every day, trying to make sure someone who is having one of the most horrific times of their lives to survive, because it is so difficult for them and for us as a society to really understand the depth of what it means to be abused by an intimate partner, someone who promises to love, to cherish you, and does exactly the opposite through no fault of your own, and to be isolated. You are their voices, and I just stand here truly humbled by this award. It was difficult getting here this morning because of the traffic. I'm sure many of you had to experience that as well, but it was worth the fight, which, and when you think about so many of the women and men and children that you deal with, how the struggle for them to get from just something, a very simple task, is so difficult because of all of the other things outside of their control that they think that they're able to control but are not able to do so. I think about my predecessors, Senator Edna Brown, who was one of the first to deal with the issue of of domestic violence for young people in not marriage or family relationships, but within intimate relationships. How many years ago was that? And we're still fighting to make a way for that. I have to raise up the name of Senator Theresa Fetter, who also is a strong advocate for women who are either trafficked or also are subject to domestic violence. So I come from a long line of legislators who believe very strongly in what it means to make sure that everyone, everywhere, all the time are safe, and that they feel safe, and that they can believe in our system. You heard from Kar'mell how the system wasn't there for her. The system still isn't there for many of the people. You know, we talk about the laws, but if we don't put the finances to them so that you don't have to, you as the ones worrying about doors being open, services being given, and all the things that are so necessary for us to uplift all parts of our communities. So I stand here saying to you very strongly that I will continue to work for you. I will continue, along with Senator Gaverone, to push legislation that will really empower each and every one of us as a society, because we must do that. We have to do that, because if we call ourselves, you know, human beings, if we say that we love one another, then that means we have to step outside of some of these frameworks that we have and work for that goal to uplift everyone. And lastly, I call the name of my niece. Her name was Janae, and she was murdered in Dayton, Ohio, and her daughter was the one that had to make the call to the police to say, I believe my daddy has shot and killed my mommy. Those are the most chilling words to hear from a child who then had to go about and live through that. So we know that intimate partner violence, we know that domestic violence, we know that any type of violence to people have such a trauma and a terrible sense of whether or not they can ever trust one another. So I stand here with hope and with the idea and with your help that we will get our legislation passed and all the other pieces of legislation that will make each and every Ohioan know that they are saved, and that we as a society will do what is required for us. So again, I want to say thank you so much for this. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And I accept this on your behalf, not on my behalf, but on all of you and all of us together that will make our society much better. So again, thank you so very much.
How about another round of applause for this year's award winners? People on the front lines every day, our organizations, our agencies, legislators, everyone. What a great group. So I want to, in closing, I want to remind everybody that in your program, we have on the inside cover, a QR code that links our annual Lifesaver fundraiser. We hope that you help contribute. Our goal this year is $30,000. Also, at the table, when you first walked in, we have these little gift bags. And inside the gift bag are our little stickers that say, another Ohioan against domestic violence. So we hope you wear these today, and you know they peel off so you can wear them the entire month of October. That would be great. So, and remember, please remember to get your picture taken over by the backdrop and posted on social media. And again, thank you all for being here today and every day, for survivors, for stepping up, stepping in. And now you get to step back and have some refreshments. And I hear the cookies are really good. Thank you, everyone.